Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Demystify Selling with Microsoft. And I'm excited for my guest, Rob Lawrence, today. Rob has been with Microsoft for a while and has got a lot of interesting information. So, Rob, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. 6 years at Microsoft, and I'll give you a little bit of background on where I work and
Sure.
type of customers I work with. So the role I do, I'm what's called an account technology strategist, and I am paired with an account executive. I am part of the team at Microsoft that sells to customers, enterprise customers. I'm in Microsoft US Enterprise. I work with majors, which is customers that are large but not quite strategic, and I am part of a business unit that is called Software and Digital Platforms. So we were formed, I think, going on 3 or 4 years ago now, and we work exclusively with other software companies. And there's a number of reasons we did that. I mean, one is that every customer of SDP is also a partner, and it's really a 360 relationship in every case. So I work exclusively with software companies. Right now, most of my customers are about between 2 and 5 billion revenue or thereabouts, and that's the space I work in.
I love that. And it's got to be an interesting dynamic where you're working with Microsoft partners that are out there selling, but are also consuming. So you're seeing
Yeah.
them from both sides of the coin, which is it's got to be an interesting dynamic. Like you're really seeing the business leverage Microsoft inside the company and outside the company.
Yeah, it's almost like a relationship between nations or something, right? We've got they buy from us, we buy from them. We build things together, we sell together, and in general, the way we see it is that our success is intertwined. So they kind of get like a special level of attention and focus being served by the software and digital platforms unit, and we work closely with Global Partner Solutions, which is the partner function at Microsoft. So,
Yeah, the GPS group or Global
correct.
Partner
Yeah. So,
Solutions Group. Yeah.
so in most cases, there'll be several of us from direct sales, SDP, and then there'll be GPS folk who work on it as well, and we partner up nicely.
And I'm just going to rewind real quick on the acronym there, SDP. If you could just kind of give.
Yeah, I'll say it one more time. Yeah, so sorry, and we always got to watch, and we're in a big organization. We develop a dialect, right? So
Yes.
so software and digital platforms. And to give a little more of the backstory on that, I mean, as you might know, Microsoft US has been transitioning from a pure geographic model to more of an industry focused model. I can't say how far that will ultimately go or how fast, but right now we're one of several industries that were carved out. So, different account relationships were pulled out of geographic regions. And we have like retail and consumer goods, we have manufacturing, we have financial services, healthcare. And, I'm part of this group that was called Software and Digital Platforms. And, the first thing was we were part of the Northeast region. There was a Midwest group that was also working all with software customers, and a Western group. And then they put us all together. And that's how we became SDP.
Love that. I love that. And I actually want to dig a little deeper because I think this is a really interesting change, and I think a change for the better, which is moving more from the geo based to the industry based. And for me, I think there's a lot of benefit to that. And bringing more specialization, bringing more industry knowledge and experience. But I'd love to hear, Rob, from you on kind of your thoughts on how that's showing up in the market.
Yeah. So I was really pleased when that change was made. I mean, I had a sense that it was coming. I remember my boss called me on the last day of the fiscal year before we had the model and said, "Hey, there's this new business unit. You're going to be part of it, and you're coming with me." And I was like, "Okay, great." I had been anticipating that something would happen, but I didn't think it would happen that fast. The first thing I noticed is that as a seller, it makes my day a lot better, more productive. Give you a sense. When I joined Microsoft, my customers included one of the top management consulting strategy firms in the world, a couple smaller management consulting firms, the largest shipping company in the world and two software companies. So, I mean, it's like driving in all different gears at the same time, right? So you go from one conversation to another. One,
Yeah,
you're talking about like client engagements, and then you're talking about international shipping, including pirates, which are a real thing. I'm not making this up.
yeah,
Shipping companies are attacked by pirates all the time. So that always made for an interesting day. In the SDP day, well, I find it more interesting because I get to drill deep on like, what is life for an independent software vendor,
mhm,
ISV, as we call them,
yeah,
my customers. And then what is the nature of the relationship they're trying to build with a hyperscaler like Microsoft? So I find generally the customers like it. I think they feel like they're getting more attention. They definitely are. And I'm just able to develop, and the teams I'm on are able to develop more expertise on, just through repetition, like working on similar dynamics, similar situations. So I just think it's a win for everybody, and really glad that we moved to this model.
yeah. I'd have to agree that I think with the repetition and being able to see how people do things differently and the learnings that you can take and learnings you can bring to your customers really got to be you know to your point a lot less chaotic.
Yeah, yeah,
Going from pirates at one time, and then you're talking about
right.
consulting engagements. So I love that. Well, let's transition and talk about that. You talk about the ISVs and working with a hyperscaler like Microsoft. What are some of the challenges that you see these ISVs are faced with, sort of day in and day out, when it comes to one partnering with Microsoft and understanding the ecosystem? I'd love to hear from you, kind of the things you see that they're challenged with each day.
Yeah, I think there's several levels and layers of challenges. I mean, one is that just, even as it was before, right? Microsoft is a big company. It's growing fast. We have, some degree of role change, like people change chairs at the end of certain fiscal years. I've been relatively stable where I am, but it does happen. So there's that turnover. But I think really the main challenge is they have a hard time understanding Microsoft in full, right? I mean, Microsoft, the word just becomes a signifier to whoever's sitting on the other side, right? So it could mean that great partner whose conference we're going to. It could be, the people whose system was down last week, whatever happened to annoy them or whatever. And so, Microsoft, I think it's called metonymy. I was an English major, but it all passed out of my head. Microsoft becomes a shorthand for all that stuff.
Yeah,
Uh, and what I try to tell customers is there is no quote unquote Microsoft. There's all different Microsofts. I wish it were easier, but that's how it is, right?
yeah,
So when you're working with a partner function, or when you're working with us, who your account team or GPS or whatever, just be aware that everyone tries to know and understand everything that's going on. It's not always possible, right? And
yeah,
and if you're disappointed in one area, like say you have a partnership idea and someone turns it down, right? Try again, right? Try with someone else, because there's no like one no from Microsoft, right? So I think that takes like a strong ego on the part of the ISV, like not a
mhm,
big ego, but a strong, healthy ego, where they say, okay, we put our best foot forward. Microsoft wasn't interested in that partnership angle, but we're just going to try again. We're not going to get angry or go back and huff about it. Just say that, we'll come back, we'll bring back a better idea, and just be patient and understand that it's a big organization. It needs to be courted. I've been on the other side of this. I mean, I worked in management consulting where, we were always trying to get the attention of customers and clients. And so I've been the person knocking on the door. Usually these days, I'm the person inside the door. So I try to show a lot of respect for having been on the other side. And I try to coach people and be like, look, just because you brought us an idea and it didn't go anywhere doesn't mean that it won't go anywhere. Like even next month, you just got to keep trying. So,
right, right. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the challenge that the ISV is faced with is understanding, what's top of mind for you, And that might be different than what's top of mind for, say, somebody in Dan Rippey's team over on GPS. And so
Right.
you really have to sort of step back and think about, what is it that I'm bringing to the table, and is that relevant to the person I'm talking to? I think for me at least, that's been a big sort of, part of how I approach Microsoft is thinking from your shoes and, what's going
Sure.
on in Rob's head. So, yeah,
Yeah, and and I've worked in all kinds of organizations, right? And of course, you still get range of personality in every organization, but I would say that Microsoft people are tend to be transparent and like will give good faith answers, right? So if you say, "How are you guys incentivized?" right, to a specific team member at Microsoft, they'll explain it to you, and that'll really help. Instead of assuming that we all have the same exact set of measures for success and everything. So yeah, I do think that's pivotal. The other thing is, I am part of, we have Microsoft E's, our kind of internal speak, and I'm on what is called the Sell To team. But this is
mhm,
part of the reason that the software digital platforms operating unit is so important. Really, most of the revenue we drive is really selling with. So the same thing that is in the title of your enterprise, the brand you've built as a content creator, selling with, that is
mhm,
utterly in the interest of the account team, because the
yeah,
account team, our customer, we just say we have ISVX, is my customer. ISVX goes and builds a solution for their end customers. They put it on Azure. That's success for me. That,
yes,
not just metaphorically, it's literally money in my pocket. So
right,
we are utterly incentivized as part of the direct team to help our customers in SDP succeed at putting solutions out there. So, and then you would, when you're around this all the time, you think that's obvious to everyone, but not sometimes people don't know this. So yeah, you have to tell them, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we all
Well,
go,
just that subtle difference of the sell to versus sell with.
yeah,
I mean, that's it sounds simple. It sounds like, oh, just dropped a couple letters and changed a couple more, but no, it's completely different. To your point, you're
yeah.
very motivated differently than, say, you're the sell to versus the sell with.
Right, right. And I mean, I want to sell too. I really want my customers using Microsoft products, right? That
Mhm.
they don't put in front of their end customers. Like I want them using M365. I want them using Dynamics. I'm comfortable, pushing for that because I think they're great products. But the bulk of our revenue in SDP is on Azure, and it's on solutions that our customers provide to their customers.
Right, right.
And I'll just to stick to a real world example that's remote from me. We all remember that like Instagram, when it had 13 people, sold for $1 billion or something, right? And
Mhm.
that's kind of how it is. So when I'm working with an ISV, they might have a very limited headcount. They might have 400 people, 1,000, 2,000, right? And Microsoft is never going to have a huge revenue stream from just selling to a customer like that. We make much more money when we sell with them,
Right.
and we view them as a leverage factor, right? We say, you know, if we work well with those 2,000 people, they're going to end up putting Microsoft products in front of 100,000 people, and that's going to spin the dials for us. So that's how we view it.
Yeah. That's super interesting, and I appreciate that example because it really helps to highlight the difference of that sort of 2,000 that were sell to versus the impact that those 2,000 can make is tenfold, 50-fold, 100-fold when it comes to selling the larger uh, sort of
Yeah.
global population.
I mean, it also means we're very interested, right? And if you've been in this industry a while, there was the era of selling licenses, right? And then of course now we're in the era of selling, really driving consumption.
Mhm.
The way I've explained it was like in the license era, right? You would sell a big license and you'd have a big party. And today you sell a forward agreement to do consumption, and maybe you all have lunch together, if that, right? So you don't really you don't really get this big celebrations. It's more like, okay, we got an agreement, now back to work, right? So it's all incremental. And the other implication, as you'll see, is that if we don't, we have to help our customer get their product to market, right? Or we're not going to make that money as SDP. So I think there's upside downside to it, but I think it's mostly upside in terms of it aligns the interests of my customers with my own. So, for the most part, I like it. I miss some of the big parties, but what are you going to do? Those are gone.
Yeah. Well, that actually brings up an interesting point in thinking about, we talked earlier about sort of understanding how, the person you're working with is motivated. And you talk about these big agreements where you're like these forward-looking consumption agreements.
Yeah.
That's where, in my mind, the ISVs can make a real impact, is helping the Microsoft account teams to consume and to leverage or use those big forward-looking consumption agreements.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those areas where ISVs need to be really clear about the fact that that's how I can help you as a seller. I can help drive those, the Mac commitment or the Azure consumption commitment.
Right. Yeah. The Microsoft Azure consumption commitment, right? Which and we, of course, everybody makes the big Mac joke, their first week here, or whatever, but we do call it a Mac. The other thing about that is I talked about our interests being better aligned, right? No seller is motivated to just go sell a large Mac to a customer that they're not going to consume, because
Right.
that's just going to create problems for everybody.
Mhm.
So whatever we agree to do, when an ISV customer of mine, partner of mine, takes on a large Mac, we have to make sure we actually have a realistic plan about who they're going to sell that to, how much Azure is going to consume, et cetera.
Mhm.
Because in this type of model, Azure for them on their books is effectively like a cost of goods sold, right?
Yeah.
So, and if the numbers don't work, something is going to go wrong for everybody in the future, right? They're not
Right.
going to, they're going to owe money for, consumption that they're not getting, right?
Mhm.
And then we're not going to see that either. And it's just a bad situation for everybody. So there's always uncertainty and risk, because it's just like we're partners in a venture. So, we both foresee a future where there's going to be revenue. So we're agreeing to an investment, but it's got to be realistic. It's got to be calibrated, and it's got to be smart. And then, of course, we have to monitor it once it's in play. So the
Right.
monitoring part is really important. And, we really need to make sure that, we structure the agreement intelligently and that we're monitoring our progress. So, those of us who work in SDP, we are very interested in the delivery capability of our ISV customers, right? We need them to get their software out there, right? Because that's how we make our money, our bonuses, et cetera. We're utterly incentivized to, be on their side and work with them.
Yeah, but and again, it's really gets down or comes back to that sort of win-win-win where,
Yeah.
if the ISV you're working with is built on Azure, is consuming Azure, and using the Azure platform to solve a big problem for your customer, everybody wins. The customer wins, they get the problem solved. You as Microsoft win, you're using then leveraging the Azure platform and helping that customer hit their Mac. And obviously the ISV wins for selling their product. So it
Right.
seems to me that that is, when that marriage happens like that, that's the happy place for everybody.
Yeah, correct. And you'll notice that we also become partners in service quality, reliability, response time, all that stuff,
Mhm.
because it's like a big chain of being, right? Like, end customer wants to use the product of my customer. That means the customer is relying on me. So, in kind of classic service management terms, right?
Mhm.
You got your customer up top, and then you've got the ISV, and then we're at the bottom, and then the folks we rely on, right? So it's a whole kind of operational chain of being, so to speak.
Yeah, it truly is an ecosystem. It
Yep.
really is an
100%.
ecosystem of the partner. So great. Rob, as we're wrapping up here and we're kind of coming to the end of our time together, and I really appreciate the insight that you shared with us on the ISV community because I think that for me, I see it as one of the fastest growing components of the Microsoft ecosystem. And I come from the SI world,
Mhm.
and I can see that even in the SI community, you know, traditional SIs are looking at this ISV ecosystem and seeing the real value here, where it's the multi parties coming together or different parties coming
Yeah.
together to offer some really great solutions. And so, I just love to get your take on that, sort of the partnership between SIs and ISVs as we're coming to a close here.
Yeah, I think if you're growing an ISV in a smart way, right? So, um, if you want to, basically your end game is valuation, right? You want to have the
Hmm.
highest valuation you can, and that means that you want to make as much of your revenue as possible from software, and you really want to minimize the revenue from services because
Hmm.
the return on those, relatively speaking, like software, is way more scalable,
Yes.
and yeah, and of course labor is linear, right?
Hmm.
So if you are in an SI, you have a totally different revenue model than an ISV, which is fine, right? You're built for that. ISV is built for that. So
Yeah.
the way I see it, um, the sooner that ISVs get in the partner game in terms of having SI partners who can do their delivery, the faster they're going to succeed, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's one part of this dynamic, right? So, I think, and that's very related to the tradition of SIs implementing systems, which goes all the way back to the 50s, if you can believe that, like
Oh,
Anderson,
wow.
right? There's like old history, right? So,
Yeah.
they've been in that game a long time. I think it's understood how their economics are different than the software economics. But the other aspect is that, really that SIs can build solutions themselves, right? So this is a trend we've seen in consulting for about 15 years, I would say, maybe a little longer. It's what, for a while it was known as asset-based consulting.
Hmm.
But you'll have, one of the big four or McKinsey or someone, they will build a solution on a hyperscaler now. And then, they will run a service in conjunction with it. I think Accenture
Right.
probably is the king of this business. So it's, develop a system that addresses a very specific business process, and then sell BPO along with it.
Right.
So not a new model, but one that's still around and it's still powerful. And, we just have SIs in some ways acting like ISVs. So
Yeah.
yeah, all interesting variations on a theme. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Rob, again, I want to thank you for your time today. I
sure
really
thing.
appreciate it. And one last question, and if somebody wants to reach out and connect with you, is LinkedIn the best way to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way. It so happens I blog on LinkedIn a lot, specifically on the topic of ISV success. I've got a whole model on my desk here of I've kind of developed a theory of like how do ISVs succeed, and this is based on observation and data, just what I've seen over and over again. And just even at this very moment, I'm putting out a series on what I call the ISV framework. So I'm about halfway through posting that. But if you go into LinkedIn, look at my activity, you can read up on that, and you can easily reach me there. Rob Lawrence. There's a picture of New York behind me, even though I live closer to Philadelphia. New York is where I report, and I'm always happy to talk ISV success, and then also just hear from other thought leaders who are out there. So thanks so much
Awesome.
for the
Well,
opportunity. Yeah,
I love it, Rob. And we'll have to have you back when you have that all published out on LinkedIn. I'd love to bring you back and have you walk us through that.
yeah, that would be great. Really appreciate it, and best of luck with your mission with demystify selling. So.